I hope you are all energized again. Again, great energy. I just cannot tell you how many people came to me and said how great it was to be in person again. And I'm sure you all feel that way. It was great. Thanks to Lucid Work again for the party at the showcase. I hope you guys are connecting, making new connection that take the time to try things and touch the solution at the showcase. I think it's the due opportunity there. Just a bit of logistics, like yesterday. Today's the last day for the showcase to open at 10. So please make sure that you make the time there to see that. It will be right after the keynote. That's where the coffee break's going to be served there. Lunch will be also served in a showcase, so that's another way for you to attend the place there. And the session room locations are on your program on the screen here, so that should not be a surprise there. One thing also, yesterday I mentioned books and signing. So for those of you who have not found the books there, when you are facing the registration on the left, there is an area where all the books are for sales there. I think it's your opportunity, plus you get a discount. So, and you can even get the book signed if the author is there. So that's one thing that you might want to do there. Like yesterday, after the keynote, we're going to reshuffle, rearrange the room. So please make sure you leave the room after the keynote so that the people can rearrange the room for the different tracks there. Today, we have something different than yesterday. We're going to have the community of interest by my friend Stan Garfield. So look for it. It's at 5:30. In the bar there, so that's an opportunity to bond with the community of interest community, which is a great one there. So, without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend Patrick Lamb. Patrick is the partner at Straight Knowledge. He spends his life between Dublin and Singapore and DC, apparently, right? Yeah, so Patrick, take it away.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Cool. Thank you very much, thanks. So this is billed as data science, information science, knowledge management. And the basic idea is that this is a whole caravan of conferences through this week, covering different areas, and I was curious as to whether those different areas actually talk to each other. So let's just do a quick sort of hand poll. How many survivors from Taxonomy Bootcamp do we have in here? So I can see. Go fair sprinkling. How many people would identify more with the sort of the data side of the house? Quite well distributed. And how many people would identify more with the knowledge management side of the house? Okay, quite a lot. You said ooh. Is that a trepidatious ooh, or it's like a majority, you're terrified. Knowledge managers. Okay, so that's useful. Just a couple of slides just to frame some of the discussion, and I have to explain the background to these slides. Dave and I got into a conversation some months ago about the relationships between data science and information science, and how they're increasingly bumping into each other and intersecting, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? And clearly, I have a knowledge management background, so I brought knowledge management into the mix, and we ran a session in Singapore with the ISKO group, a panel on exactly this topic, data science, information science, and knowledge management. Because we both have information science backgrounds, and we were in Singapore, which is very ordered, we kind of just divided up the world very nicely to everybody's satisfaction. And you'll see some of those divisions in a couple of the slides that follow. And then we thought this would be interesting to do at KM World because you've got these parallel tracks going on. And we thought, who else, can we invite to come and join the dialogue? And so we have Suzanne Roth from Asian Development Bank, who you have a medical background, so very data evidence driven, but you're also now running the whole knowledge management side of things for Asian Development Bank. And then we have Irena Zadonsky, who's from data into information management, basically, so through Federal Reserve Board, well, a whole range of data and information management and data governance roles, now with Amtrak. The first, so if we showed the slides, right, from the Singapore session, where we satisfactorily divided up the world. And Irena, you had some immediate questions about those. First of which was, where's management in all of this? Because in the original slide that we had knowledge management at the top, and we had information science and data science, as in the title for this session. And Irena's question, well, where's information management? And where's data management? They're not necessarily the same things as information science and data science. So that's kind of the first question I'd like to start off with, which is, where does the science come into what we do? And does it really matter that knowledge management doesn't have a science?
I disagree.
Me too.
Yeah.
With what?
With that there's no science in knowledge management. I think that's not a correct statement.
Go on.
Yeah, well, we do. I mean, science is, you define something as science when you actually have a hypothesis, you do experiments, and you try to create evidence, and then you improve your practice. So in knowledge management, we have a lot of that. And I would say if economics is a science, then knowledge management is definitely a science because we actually run experiments, we look at people's behavior, and we have proven tools and techniques and methods that we know work in knowledge management. There are publications on knowledge management, there are academicians, you can study knowledge management, so definitely it's a science. And as we evolve in the world and we need more transdisciplinary areas and subjects, it's probably the science of the future.
How do you feel about that?
I agree with that. I mean, just because seeing sheer need for managing knowledge, whatever environments that we work and experience in, it's just what's that, louder?
Or more volume on the mic?
While the mic guys.
Yeah.
There's one coming.
You feel free to change your opinion while we wait for the volume to change.
On this subject, I actually agree.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm just preparing my arguments here to demolish both of those positions, because there's a lot of counter evidence to what you're saying. So you do feel free to moderate your opinion if you want to. Why do you agree?
Well, because we heading into the world where more complicated, more unpredictable, more complex, and so everybody has a knowledge of their subject matter, whether business knowledge, the knowledge dealing with the data, knowledge with managing the data. So all that have to be managed and shared.
Yes. So there is a need for science,
right.
but the question is, do we have it? Dave, do you have an opinion?
Well, yeah. I mean, so my fundamental response is, does it measure up to what we call science? And as Suzanne said, science is something that has a methodology. It looks for primary evidence, empirical evidence. It organizes that evidence into something that's human comprehensible, and it subjects it to iterative tests and attempts at predictability. And this is the scientific method. And I'm the one on the stage who's not a KM practitioner, so I'm probably the least qualified to talk here. But if what you do measures up to that...
You may be the most disinterested.
What's that?
You may be the most disinterested in this particular question.
No, I'm not disinterested because I would say if we look at, let's say, data science particularly, it is very analytical, it's very about looking at primary evidence. And if KM has a role of mediation and coordination between these various efforts, the more that KM practitioners are in sync with the scientific methods that might be more sort of first nature rather than second nature in those other disciplines, the better they would be.
That's not science, that's management.
Okay, but it is, so the initial question was why we have knowledge management, why don't we call it knowledge science and so forth. It's called what it is. If you do things...
Is it scientific? That's my question.
I'm saying,
I mean,
you are the
I think we all agree it ought to be,
practitioners in the room. I mean,
Yeah,
take another poll if you like. How many people think that you apply scientific methodology to what you do?
How many people, and feel free to moderate your opinions, how many people feel that knowledge management is scientific? And how many people feel that it isn't? And how many people do not have the courage to raise their hands? Right. So I don't think we're anyway settled on this. Let me put a counter case to you, and I don't want to spend too long on the science piece, but it is important because it goes to the roots of why we have challenges, I think, in managing the intersection between these three areas. That knowledge management in practice is a set of practices which are not consistent, which are not consistently described, which are the landscape within which people from multiple disciplines, some of which have sciences behind them, and some of which don't, but inconsistent sciences. So that knowledge management as a practice does not have a single coherent scientific framework within which it operates. That's the counter proposal. And I come out of the experience of trying to write a book on knowledge auditing, which is supposed to be an evidence-based process, and I had to spend 15 years figuring out where all of these different practices came from and how they could be put into a single framework. So it's not. I think we all agree that the scientific approach is important, but it's not straightforward. It's not present and embedded in the practice, as far as I'm concerned. And of course, I'm being very immoderate here because I'm not supposed to express my opinions. Good luck. And the second thing I just wanted to say about science is that and I'm going to take a very skeptical line on this. It doesn't necessarily represent my full view, but it's an argument that science is used in organizations as a means to claim authority. That's basically what it does. If you look at the current enthusiasm for data science, it's relatively recent in organizations. It's being used by data management to give itself credibility. Information management does the same thing with information science. A lot of information managers do not use information science. Irena, comment.
That's very true. I haven't until very recently, so that's very true.
Yeah, so there isn't necessarily, we claim the science, but don't necessarily practice it in the management piece of it. How do you feel about that, Suzanne?
I mean, I think your point is very valid, that the understanding of knowledge management as a science has to evolve. I think from this conference, maybe we can say that knowledge management is a science and it needs a scientific approach. If we look at how COVID was managed or how climate change is managed, I think it very well shows that we need to have a scientific approach to managing the data and the information. and then the knowledge that comes from it to actually make sense of it. So maybe connecting with what Dave said yesterday, maybe knowledge management is complexity science. And it's increasingly needed because we have to make sense of the world and kind of inform action appropriately.
Right. And Dave's example is a good one, because that is a good example of using scientific methods and approaches and building it into management practice. But I don't think that's pervasive.
Well, that's something we can change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave, you're very firmly wedded to information science, as we discovered last night.
Well, so I come to this panel from a world in which I work with people from the information science background and overlapping the data science background, and somewhat, because I've encountered and worked with you, Patrick, on many occasions. So that means I must also overlap with the KM world. But yeah, I mean, my kind of root experience and knowledge is in the organization of knowledge, KO. So KO is kind of my background. That does not mean in any way that I don't recognize the value of KM or of data science. In fact, I absolutely believe that these things need to be more synergistic. But in terms of within an organization, people who have a science background asserting the value that it has, good for them. Science is a very good method. And it's not the only method, and there is a lot I know that KM deals with, which is human interaction and things that cannot quite be captured in data tables and so forth, and good for that too. Yeah.
Well, there are arguments that the data side of the house can capture that by sort of micro data capture and then modeling digital people and then nudging them and managing them through that.
I wouldn't want that to be the only method of capturing information and knowledge about an organization.
No, right. Yes. Yeah. But there are camps that would suggest that. So how do people feel about? Oh, never mind. Let's move on to territory and land grabs. So there was a very influential paper published in 2002, just as knowledge management was coming into vogue. And the paper was called The Nonsense of Knowledge Management. It was written by a professor of information science at the University of Sheffield called Tom Wilson. And his argument was basically, what we call knowledge management is actually information management. And it's just been badged knowledge management by consulting firms and technology vendors to make it appear more sexy, because the information management side of the house is just boring and doesn't seem to be working. So we come in with a new solution. So they're basically a land grab. The knowledge management people have come in and seized the territory and renamed it for information management. And arguably the same could be said for the knowledge management and data management side of the house today. We're looking at the showcase, for example, the AI, ML, data side, data science side seems to have expanded in relation to pure play, if there is such a thing, knowledge management applications and so on. So the question here is, do knowledge management, information science, data management, data science, do they have their own territories and can be clearly distinguished? Or are they fated to be struggling over the same territory? And we had that image to try and sort of capture that question. Who'd like to lead the charge on this?
I could start. I think it very much depends on what functions are in the organization and what organization is focusing on. 10 of my federal customers did not have knowledge management practice, right? Some of them did not have information management practice, but it doesn't mean that knowledge management and information management is not happening.
But what should they be doing? What do you think? I mean, should they be bringing in knowledge management practices, or are their information and data management practices sufficient to solve the problem? Do we really need knowledge managers? That's a very dangerous question to ask in the room where the majority are knowledge managers, but never mind.
I think, again, it very much depends on the need, and what the need is to define what needs to be improved and what the desired outcomes are, and then what I actually think that every time you create a function, it creates the borders. It's like the same with the projects,
It
right?
creates
borders.
Okay. Yes.
Fences.
Yes.
And then people within the fence become very defensive and very
Right.
protective of their territory. So I don't have the answer, but I do know that the more multi-disciplinary teams are, the better the outcomes will be.
So you would be in favor of data and information and knowledge in the same teams, addressing common problems?
I'm not sure what the perfect model would be. I think, again, it depends on the situation, but I do feel that a lot of the disciplines will be merging, should be merging to enrich each other.
Okay. Assuming that they can talk to each other, that they can understand, use the same language and understand what they mean by it, which is by no means true. Have any of you come across instances where data management, information management, any combination of those three have been in competition with each other within an organization, without naming names?
And for us, it's not a competition. It's really a collaboration. We are actually, in fact, creating a job family of knowledge managers, communication experts, and information managers. Data science is a bit nascent in the Asian Development Bank, but that is also increasing. And we are using, I think it does depend who you speak to. So you can speak in the language of the data scientist or the information scientist or manager or the knowledge, or from the knowledge management perspective. So different organizations, companies have different tasks, so you might also want to put more effort into one or the other, right? Depending on what the purpose is of the organization. So I think you can make also some parallels to medicine, where you would have the laboratory expert, right, who looks at blood and takes does diagnostics, and then you have someone who maybe is a radiologist who looks more at information, and then you still need someone who makes sense of it and brings different disciplines together and make sure the patient changed behavior and learns something and is connected to others. So maybe that's more of the role of the knowledge manager.
So that goes back to something you referred to, which is kind of an orchestrating role for knowledge management.
I mean, so in my time in this industry, which is about 25 years, we've worked with lots of different clients. So I've seen situations where, yes, there is strong competition for resources between functions, and others where it's more balanced. I mean, balance is kind of where we need to be. If a human everything is competing for resources. Nations compete, people compete, departments compete, and so forth. But if a human put all of their effort into acquiring water, they would starve of food and die. And if they put all of their resources into food without water, they would starve and die. We need a balance of these things, and the specific things we're talking about, the mix of KM and information science and management, and data science and management, they're all they're all needed.
In different proportions, depending on the need. That was your...
Yes.
Depending on what the specific need is.
Yeah. I mean, some organizations are going to be very data-centric, data-driven, and others are going to be less so. But if the territorialism, this was your primary theme for this bit, territory, if the territorialism is untamed, then you can win a war win a battle and lose a war, because your gains will diminish the overall effectiveness of the business. So, you know, I think awareness that you need all of these different things among all the different disciplines would be a healthy place to be.
Right.
But maybe one point to that, I mean, even in companies which are data science heavy, you need knowledge management skills because you need to make sure people know what their job is. They need to have handovers, you need to onboard them, they need to be able to deliver at a certain quality. You need to have, obviously, also conversations about these different people. I think that's really also at the essence of this conference, because if we just focus on data and information, which can be automated, right? We have many vendors here, then, you know, it could happen that we have a lot of information and data that is not even needed or doesn't make sense. So you still need the sense-making aspect
Absolutely.
and the learning aspect of knowledge management.
I don't think anyone could disagree with that. But in practice, the data people are saying, yeah, we need knowledge and we need knowledge management around it, but I don't want those KM folks looking at my stuff because they don't understand it. So the territorialism is still there, and we can never get away from the competition for resources.
No.
And if you know, you've got, I mean, I give an example of a project that we've just completed. Information, it basically knowledge management frames. There are knowledge management goals for the project. Information science driven. So we're managing content, structuring, organizing it, and so on to deliver benefits to support the KM mission. Thus far, beautiful. Then there's a leadership change, and the new leadership are very keen on data science. And all of this hard work around taxonomies and figuring out how to make SharePoint deliver search that suits people. We can do this with you know, some quickly crafted AI ML. Let's get a consultant in to show some glossy results. And the budget suddenly shifts from that project and just gets swallowed up in this black hole of sexy demos, which never go anywhere. And I'm sure that's not a unique experience. So how do we, you know, we know what should happen, but how do we manage that transition where you're starting from a position of competition for resources and, you know, the different schools competing on propaganda?
Can I?
Please.
Well, I would say, you know, I'm kind of advocating collaboration, which is another topic, so I don't want to kind of open that early.
But we can move into it if you like.
If you can, through collaboration success stories, demonstrate that you need all of these things and they actually, the sum of them is synergistic, it creates something bigger than the individual parts, then you can perhaps diffuse that competitive, or moderate that competitive.
Or nudge it.
Yeah, just in the right direction. So I would say, if one believes that all three are necessary, and I certainly do, then an effective organization will be one that can see that there are success stories behind that.
Okay. Yeah, I am, but I don't think that demonstration alone is enough. And the reason I don't think that is Dan here, Dan Hanneman. He had a session on knowledge management at Shell yesterday, and one thing that really came out from that was they have an expert knowledge program where they can demonstrate millions and millions and millions of dollars of value from the use of the system. As soon as they lose a sponsor and a new person comes in, it can take a year, 2 years before that recovers in terms of the value it creates, because the story of the success is not enough. You've got to be able to work that environment and understand how it works and work the levers of it.
Yeah, and I mean, number one, you can show it through money saved, but you can also, and that's a bit dangerous always, I feel, but you can also, of course, see how you're developing new business opportunities. I think that's more interesting. Or you can also look obviously at your workforce satisfaction, performance, how you retain your workforce. So there are very many different ways to look at it from an efficiency, a productivity, and an innovation angle. I think going forward, the innovation angle is probably the most interesting one. If we consider that we all have to change how we live, how we work, we have to decarbonize the world. So the role of knowledge management for innovation is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the need of good understanding of information science, data science, and knowledge management of leaders. And that's probably a skill of future leaders.
And I think also being able to communicate, work across boundaries, where you are not using common language, you have to establish common language. I mean, you've made a journey, right, from sort of the data side and then into information management, and then you were looking at the whole knowledge management side of the house.
Right.
How do you...
My background is in information management, starting with the hands-on work with data, to project delivery, to advisory, focusing primarily on architecture, strategy, governance as of late. So yes, as you get to that level, you just get a holistic view of the supply chain of the data, what's done with the data, the importance of the, how data needs to be collected and packaged to consumer for use and sharing. So when we start looking at the not structured data, but unstructured data, which is 80% of any data in any organization, then you cannot help but go to information science and bring the folks who could help with the concept extraction and use that to create the models and to build.
So is that easy, typically, to do that, to make that transition in an organization?
It wasn't difficult. I think, again, the need drove that.
Right, so making the need very transparent.
Right.
Right.
And the other point I was thinking as you were talking about what else would help, I think it would help if the, starting from the educational, when folks are being trained to a certain degree, that there have to be some exposure to other disciplines as well. That's where it starts.
Right, right. I mean, we're kind of in the territory of collaboration already between these different disciplines. What would good collaboration look like, and what are the barriers that get in the way?
I think, again, the recent concept of productizing everything perhaps appear to be, for now, is more conducive than doing things as a project. That's where multidisciplinary teams work on one product and collaborate.
Can you give an example of a product?
Something that could be just related to text analytics that would require probably the knowledge of the how the data is being sourced, what's done with it, how it's stored, how it's processed, but it also needs information science to bring intelligent search and analysis to this data through concept and extraction and adding context.
Right.
About
Does it
that.
need knowledge management?
Of course.
I'm not sure that springs from the heart or from the room.
Well,
I'm not seeing the knowledge management piece in this.
I think.
I just wonder, these knowledge managers. Well, I will in a second, yeah, but I don't want to get there too quickly. I'm just again, it just keeps bringing me back to this science management thing and the unspecificity of knowledge management, trying to cover so many bases. It's very hard to pin down what value it's adding.
Knowledge management is part of that, because that's how you do the user analysis and planning and strategizing and everything. It may not necessarily...
It's just not called knowledge management.
Right. Well, there are elements of that, right?
Yeah. So do we need the label at all? We just go and distribute ourselves amongst these teams that are doing data and information.
Well, for the collaboration aspect, you need the knowledge managers. I mean, that's where you bring people together, you build processes that actually lead to collaboration across different teams, and you enhance, you help with learning processes and actually using information and data.
So oiling the wheels of all this. And I
Yes.
think you refer to orchestration, I think.
I do, but I don't know if this is going to be useful or unuseful, but I'll just, because the knowledge, the KM piece is, as I've already said, not my stronghold, but by analogy, if one thinks about data as ingredients, then information becomes a meal. It is prepared in a way that it is human consumable. And if, by analogy, we think of knowledge as nutrition, then we're actually thinking about how those meals fuel and power human thought and deeds. And so is there a role for KM as the orchestrators of how knowledge is used and shared within an organization? I'd say absolutely. You need to be in the restaurant and in the kitchen and having an orchestrating
Is
role.
that what knowledge managers actually do?
Yeah, all the time, 100%.
I'll take your word for it. I would have a question about competencies. If you're playing in the data space and you're attempting knowledge management on that, do knowledge managers in general know enough about the data space to be able to do that competently? Or does it not matter? Are you discipline agnostic?
It's agnostic. The role of knowledge management isn't to be smarter than the data folks. It's to be able to help the data folks leverage their know-how, expertise, and insights to better the data folks and the mission of the organization.
Yes.
And
That's the difference.
so the comment here is that the role of just so that the full audience can hear it, the role of knowledge management is not to be better than the data people, but to oil the wheels and make sure that they can do the best they can do for the organization. Is that a fair paraphrase?
At least that's how I do knowledge management in my organization.
Right, right. What about when you are a knowledge manager coming out of an information science background and you think the best solution is a taxonomy, and your data people are coming up with an entirely alternate solution that doesn't require that information science crap?
But then you hired the wrong knowledge manager.
By the way, I come from an information management background.
Right, yeah.
Well, you did a good job then.
I was amazed. I came out of an information science background. I was amazed that knowledge management could be done by non-information managers when I discovered that. I was just blown away by it. Dave, you had an example yesterday of collaboration between the disciplines.
Oh, yeah. So last week, one of my clients very courteously sent me a paper they were about to publish and said, you know, do I have your permission? It mentions your company and product. And I was kind of like, well, yes, this sounds like a good thing. It was a story about exactly what we're talking about. It was a data science team that was doing deep analytics of tens of thousands of data points coming in a day, and using all the data analytics and machine learning and predictive science, predictive models can bring to this, to extract and distill that down into something that can be handed over to the information science team, aka taxonomists, ontologists, and it from tens of thousands of things going down to, let's say, their example was 50 things a day. The taxonomy
So what were the
team,
information science people supposed to be doing with that?
well, then they feed that into the knowledge organization system, the ontology, the
Yes.
taxonomy.
For what purpose? What's the value
Well,
of
for the
this?
purpose of it all better describes this particular business is kind of like food from restaurants to home, basically through apps. Now, you've got vast amounts of different descriptive languages being used by different restaurants and different menu items and so on, and they're trying to impose some normalization that you can then deliver a better a better range of options to the customers on their
human
apps.
beings, right? Okay.
But the thing here is they described a virtuous circle in which the data team, and they talked about teams collaborating. This was really, really cool stuff. The data team is doing things that enhance the taxonomy information team that then improve the model that provides a ground truth for those machine learning models to improve themselves, and you have this super, super virtuous circle. They described saving hours and hours of manual work on a daily basis and improving the customer experience. Okay. And yeah.
So collaboration can work, but I'm still not hearing anything about knowledge management. This is, I do actually like knowledge management, just to make it clear, just in case it's not clear. I'm very, very heavily committed to it. This is how we divided the world up very, very neatly back in the summer, Dave. And it's a nice framework for all sorts of reasons. It sort of acknowledges the core value that different capabilities bring from data science and information science and knowledge management, and it acknowledges overlaps between those two things, potential overlaps and areas of collaboration, and it suggests a core at the center that might underpin how successful collaboration might work. So it's nice from that point of view. Is it real? Is it feasible? Irena, you had some immediate reactions when you looked at this.
Well, I looked at the first version and it looks quite different, and that was my reaction.
You reacted, and then we modified it a bit just to make it less objectionable to you. But what were your... Which is part of the whole thing, right? How do we accommodate these completely different perspectives? I mean, different disciplines bringing very different lenses to the same territory.
I think it's just, to me, the challenge is when you translate a set of things, the tasks, into a function, then where it starts, the territorial battle starts.
Right.
So if you just have combination of skills, like to...
But what do we call this team that brings data science and information science and knowledge management
Susan just described how you create the different job roles. What does the team called? How did you organize the functions for those folks to work in?
How's the team called? I mean, in a way, these are I would call it now, maybe all of them are the knowledge scientists.
Well, you're a KM. I mean, that's understandable because you're a knowledge manager, right? So.
But I had roles as in other functions. So I think the main message is if you leave the data science alone, you get a lot of data that you don't necessarily need or make or is even relevant. If you leave the information science people alone, you don't know how to make sense of the information. I mean, again, sorry to come back to the example of COVID, right, where we use data. Right? We built models, but we did not apply proper information science or knowledge management to make sense of it. It led in countries to 2 years of school closure, unintended consequences, not thinking about best practices of the past, not comparing how countries are managing actually these problems across boundaries and sectors and teams. So that's, for me, the last 2 years show that we need knowledge management to actually coordinate all of that.
Okay, cool. That's a nice, very nice example. Thanks. We're running close to time, and I want to make sure we get time for at least one or two questions or comments or ventings of steam from the audience. Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask, what are we using as basis to say that information science and data science does exist?
There's an academic answer to that question, which is that there are journals and conferences and books and professors and schools teaching these things. So those are typically markers of a scientific discipline and a common core of principles and accepted standards and frameworks. So that would be the external evidence of that. Now, I think that comes to the question of how does that relate to management? is the management practice actually using that corpus and that frame of reference?
I'd love you to touch on the necessity of art and craft in knowledge management, which is the necessity in data science and information science.
The necessity of art and craft in knowledge management, which is not a necessity in information science and data science, might be an arguable point, but I'm not going to take it on. Who's brave enough to do
Well, that's why
That's a great question.
Multidisciplinary. So that's, I think, the beauty of it. And recognizing that we need multidisciplinary capabilities is important, especially if we think about increasing automation. Right? What's then our role as humans if we don't bring in art and, yeah. And what did you say, arts and craft?
Arts and craft,
yeah,
yes. Yeah. Sarah at the back.
Arguably, knowledge is applied skills and experience, and we share those things. And science is consensus. We can't achieve consensus.
Oh, and science is not
without
consensus.
collaboration and sharing of information, right? When we agree that something about science is a fact, it's because scientists got together, collaborated on all of the evidence, and agreed what the evidence showed. Knowledge management ensures that that decision process happens.
Yeah, I think we can.
You
Yeah.
have scientific fact without knowledge management. Somebody's calling a conference, publishing papers, bringing papers together, making sure that the proof is there, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you started that sentence, that question or comment with arguably, because there are a lot of scientists who would say it's all about methodology, not about the content. That the content is only the product of the methodology. So there's a kind of an overlap there as well. You know, in the knowledge management piece is what a lot of scientists would think is what they do in science. But yes, you're pointing to something that's very important to us, I think. Brett.
Thanks. I think a part that's missing is who's paying the bill? The leadership and what the organization is doing. Someone asked earlier, well, does a knowledge management know information management? That's less important because do we know what the business of the business is? Because then we're going to be able to figure out who needs to know what things you need to know, and then you figure these things out. As you start bringing that pieces together, then you start mapping those processes, and I think that's something that's important to outline here that needs to be more explicit. It's not just supporting those processes, it's defining them so that you know what data are required, what decisions drive by data, what information, how it's deposited, and all of those other pieces and parts that we do. And then the knowledge manager, that bringing it together piece, comes together to create that piece that George likes to talk about, which is moving from collaboration to cooperation.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Brett. Jean-Claude is standing there looking very threatening with his microphone. I do want to do one very quick thing. I just want to take a sense of the audience, given what you've heard. Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about our prospects for collaboration? Optimistic. Pessimistic.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
very much
Patrick.
to our panel.
Thank you, distinguished panel. Thank you very much.